What's going on? YouTube's what's happening? It's about 5 a.m. It's a beautiful morning. It's Sunday. Um, so here's your prophecy. Here's my prophecy to you. Well, I'm going to give you some, I'm going to prophesy to you, but first I want to tell you, I want to talk about why it's so important to break those unsuccessful habits. You already know why it's important. You probably also know that it's very difficult. It can be very difficult for some people, depending on what it is. Um, I have a little bit of a head cold, so you have to excuse me, but it's imperative. It's imperative that you break every unsuccessful conditioning in your life. Because if you don't, your outcome will never change. And most people are unhappy with their life because they're not seeing different outcomes, because they're not doing anything different. They keep doing the same things, expecting different results. And we all know that that is the definition of insanity, right? But your conditioning, our conditioning is so powerful, especially in this society where we're brought up to show up and shut up and just listen and wait for instructions. Well, that comes from an old time. It comes from an older time. It comes from a generation where people were being for manufacturing jobs, right? The bell rings at 9 o'clock, you clock in, you stand on the assembly line, and you shut the hell up and do your job. Times are different. In fact, if you look at the average wage earner, like the average job, um, it's almost unthinkable to see people spending their time in ways where there's such a little payoff. So this is why it's important, right? It's not just about making more money, breaking those habits and conditioning. It's not just about making more money. It's about being a better person. It's about creating new results. It's about doing something different. It's about defying the odds, right? Stepping out of the norm. Because anyone can live in a way where they're just attached to old conditioning and old programming. And when you walk around in the world, if you go out in public, you'll see people operating out of these old habitual patterns. And personally, sometimes I feel pain knowing that people are suffering and yet they're not willing to do anything about it. And that's the most painful part. Is not just when you're not willing to change, but it's almost a resistance to change. And that's painful. Because the only way you're going to move towards a goal in your life, or you're going to move towards fulfillment in your life, is by being so obsessed with change that you will give everything up. Everything. This is serious. I'm talking about it. You're willing to give up every damn thing to make that result, to get that result, to get that outcome. And if you don't have that kind of dedication, well, your results are going to be very predictable. And I don't know about you, but I don't like predictable results unless they're taking me somewhere. So, if you're watching this and you're still listening by now, I think it's safe to assume that you're somebody who desires change, who desires the next level, someone who has higher standards than normal. Good enough isn't really good enough. You know, when you see somebody that has the attitude of, oh, everything's fine, or good enough is good enough, well, that's just not the case. Good enough is never good enough. I mean, if you want good results, you got to be great. If you're just good enough, your results are not going to be good. They'll be subpar. But if you're watching this, it's Sunday morning. I'm going to start a tradition here right now. Sunday morning prophecy. I'm going to prophesy into your life. Because you're here for a purpose. And you're listening to this for a purpose. The outcomes that you're going to create moving forward are going to defy the odds. You are going to create such incredible results that people are going to wonder. You're going to boggle people's minds with what you do and what you create. Because you're someone who's committed to change. And you're someone who's committed to breaking that conditioning. Our conditioning, the societal conditioning, is so powerful. So powerful. And the conditioning of the average peer group, if you look at who you spend the most of your time with, and the conditioning is so powerful. And the conditioning is for failure. The world is conditioning you for failure. I'm sorry to tell you this, but the financial system conditions you for failure. That's why bankruptcy exists. It conditions you for failure. And if you don't condition yourself for success, you're going to pay the price. And that's not just with money. It's with every other aspect of life. You need to condition yourself for success. I got by for years, sleeping in, waking up late, not really putting anything into my mornings. But I knew that's an unsuccessful habit. And I got by, and I reached a certain level of success. But it wasn't acceptable. It was just good enough. Good enough is just not acceptable. And that's why, that's why I made this commitment to really change the approach, to really change the habitual conditioning. Because I would get by on just good enough. It's just good enough that I would wake up at like 8 o'clock and head to work, get there when I get there. It was just good enough. But you know what? That's not good enough for me. Because I have higher standards. And if you don't have you need higher standards to break that conditioning. This world is conditioned for low standards. Look at the standards. They are exceptionally low. If you have a job that's good enough, maybe it's paying $15 an hour. It's good enough. First of all, I don't know how anyone could survive on that. That's not good enough. And good enough ain't good enough in that scenario for me. But the conditioning is where a whole world of difference can be made. If you break old patterns and old conditioning, You have to put a new set of standards in place. Put a new set of conditions in place for yourself. So you need to live by higher standards. You can't just have higher standards. You have to live by those standards. And that's how you break habitual patterns of failure, bad results, low results, good enough results. You don't want good enough results. You're not here for good enough results. You're here for excellent results. And to get excellent results, you have to be fucking phenomenal in everything that you do. This isn't about being perfect. You're already perfect. God made you in his image, perfect. But you are not flawless, because human beings are not flawless. Every human being falls short of the glory of God. But through God's grace, you have this possibility to be empowered, to empower yourself to break those old habits and conditioning, to step forward into a new set of expectations. Because the world out there functions every day on just good enough. And I didn't come here to just be good enough. I don't know about you, but we march towards the high calling of God. What does that mean? It means your calling is to bring greatness down into this realm, into this earth, into this life. Your existence needs to exemplify and glorify God. That is the highest standard available. It's the only game in town, right? That's the highest standard available. And I'm not making you wrong. I won't make anybody wrong who falls short of that. We all do. But it's setting the expectation. It's what is the expectation? Is there an expectation? I'm going to say that if you're still watching this, there's an expectation for greatness on your life. You have an expectation to experience God's power. You have an expectation to experience a higher level. And that good enough isn't just good enough. And you're here because you're going to fulfill on that expectation. I'm prophesying that you will fulfill on those expectations. And I acknowledge you, and I want to thank you for being a person of excellence and for having higher standards. And I'm encouraging you to continue. I know it's work. It's a lot of work. But I acknowledge you and I thank you for being a person of excellence, for being somebody who is stepping out of the good enough conditioning and setting a new standard and living that standard. God bless you. Have a great day.